Hey, hi, it is I. I'm here again to rank all the games I played in 2023. It's a super silly thing I like to do every year. There are no extra categories. It's just one flat category where every game I played this year, no matter what year it released, no matter what budget it had in development, gets ranked together. Definitely don't take this too seriously. The only thing I usually say is I generally am just going by gut feeling here or tilt value on my ranking. Usually I'm in a state of overanalyzing these sorts of things, but for this list I'm guided by general feelings. I truly love video games, and that's the only reason I even do this exercise or take the time to catalog and think over all the amazing experiences I had over the year. So try not to take this as slamming some games and lifting up others. While there were one or two games maybe that I didn't outright enjoy this year, by and large, this is a celebratory and reflective time for me, so let's just enjoy this. First off, I have to address a mega omission on the list this year, and that's Starfield. And that's because I helped on that game. So obviously I'm too close to it, or too close to the project to put it anywhere on the list. But yes, I did play it all the way through. We're gonna speed run a category of games I just say that I tried. Either I don't think I played long enough to form an opinion, or I played just long enough to know it's not for me and bailed on it. Okay, let's just take a look at that. Iconoclasts. This game is not bad at all, but it just couldn't hold my attention for one reason or another. Sort of a theme I've noticed this year with myself is that if a game has written elements in it, they've got to be really sharp. Otherwise, I find it feels either superfluous or sloppy. But the gameplay was fairly decent in this. I don't know, it just wasn't doing anything for me, but I might give it another try later. Bonfire Peaks. This is a brain-teasing puzzle game in the vein of Steven's Sausage Roll. I only played a trial of it, but I really liked what I saw there. It's super tricky, but it's fun. I'll definitely be coming back to play the rest later. I played a bit of this game and was enjoying it a little bit, but I feel like at the time that I picked it up, maybe I just wasn't ready for a large RPG like this. But I actually did like some of the writing and the combat system that I tried out during this short period of time that I tried it. So I actually might go back to this one later. Dave the Diver. The indie game that's not actually an indie game. This game has won a lot of people over. I played a demo of this one and really enjoyed it. I can tell it's fairly grindy though. It's got one of these sort of grind loops where you have to just keep coming back to farm certain things, I guess. And I wasn't really in the headspace for doing it just yet. Maybe someday. Destiny 2. The game feel in this is killer. Seriously, some of the best first-person control and shooting I have ever seen. It was almost enough for me to keep playing, but the actual architecture around the MMO parts of this are so obtuse it was laughable. No, really, even at one of the very first tutorials I started to get shot by some flying transport thing while I'm in an important onboarding conversation with an NPC. I just laughed and bailed soon after. Legitimately looking forward to Bungie's marathon that's coming out in a couple years though, as that will be a competitive multiplayer shooter and not, whatever this is. The game feel applied to something like that would be way better for my tastes. Kayak VR Mirage. One of the few games that just made me motion sick out of the gate. There's no way I'm gonna be going to Hurlsville, so I bailed on this one. Paradise Killer. I love the music and art for this game, but it just didn't click with me with the writing and the navigation of the world at all, which really sucks as I love the vaporwave-like aesthetic and the vibe of the world. Sky Aurora Concert. This one is not included in the main list because it's so short. It was an Aurora concert inside the game Sky. That's all. Really fun and some excellent music. I know it's easy to make fun of, but I actually really like these kinds of events, and I think they'll only get more interesting and interactive as every year goes on. Number 42, Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War. This is a rare game where I don't need to mince words on. I know exactly how I feel. I just don't like it very much. I find it actually kind of gross. Even if I could ignore gunning down the Vietnamese for Team America points or being a great proxy for the US military recruitment, the game is just boring, and it has a short, clumsy, kind of disjointed story. I felt bleh after playing this game. When the credits rolled, I thought, well, those are hours I'll never get back. Luckily, there really aren't that many games at all that make me feel gross after playing them, and as you'll see very soon, I actually ended up enjoying tons of other games this year, so on to better things. Number 41, Gears of War 5. This game was supposed to be some kind of big change to the series, but honestly I didn't see much of that. The game is still a cover shooter filled with waves of aliens and packed to the gills with beefy military types. Same as always. My only exposure to Gears was playing it in multiplayer on my Xbox 360 at LAN parties back in the day. And this game just sort of assumes you've been following the story all this time with a brief catch up at the beginning. I'll be honest, literally nothing about the story interested me. The gameplay also just felt kind of dated at this point too. Maybe if I had played it in multiplayer, I would have actually liked it more. I actually really used to enjoy the cover focused fights of Gears in multiplayer, despite not really liking the theme of the game itself, like the sort of package around it. Here, I just found it sort of dull and fairly uninteresting. I think this series would have to seriously shake up for me to give some attention again in the future. Number 40, Jet. This one was sad for me. I was really looking forward to it given the pedigree with the team behind it, but I just found it clunky and grating. I do think that the art direction almost redeems it. It's super striking at times with huge scale and nice art for the environment. Sound design is equally cool. When I played it, I found it let down a bit with some of the performance issues. I really don't want to harp on it too hard because this is an ambitious game from a relatively smaller team, but for me, it just screams overscoped and should have been pared down to give it more polish, more focus. I mean, maybe this was the exact thing that the team wanted to make, which, hey, fair play. I just think if that's the case, then this isn't aimed at someone with my tastes. Number 39, Far Cry 6. We originally started playing this game because we thought it had a split-screen co-op mode. Turns out it doesn't. So we kept playing it in single player, and honestly, this kind of game just doesn't work for me very much. It just feels bland. I did spend some time reflecting on why something so big and bombastic can feel wooden and hollow to me. I think there's just something about the direction of these Ubisoft games that feels like it's lacking authenticity, or whatever the closest feeling to authenticity really is for a title like this. It's sort of like a game pantomiming a cool revolutionary tale in Cuba that hasn't earned anything along the way. It had some fairly fun mechanics here and there though. Some of the dynamic gameplay elements were pretty cool, which can affect how combat scenarios unfold for you, but overall I just couldn't shake this feeling like I was playing something kind of phony. It's hard to describe. Number 38, As Dusk Falls. This is a sort of visual novel of sorts sporting a very bold style. There are all sorts of dramatic moments ready to grab your attention. Of course, a game like this really does hinge on the writing and how expertly they can carry you through the dialogue and overall narrative. Unfortunately, I just wasn't feeling the writing in this game as much as I hoped, and the performances were only okay. A combination of the images, the performances, and the writing just didn't gel together, even though I think separately some of it was really good. It's not a bad game by any stretch, but players' mileage will vary wildly based on how much of the story works for you. Unfortunately, it wasn't my favorite story. Still, I'm looking forward to seeing what this developer puts out next after this spirited outing. I think this formula has potential. Number 37, I'm on Observation Duty 5. This is a very small horror game that plays a bit like spooky Spot the Difference. You flip through the various security cameras and have to see if anything's out of place. If you do, you need to report it under the correct category. Of course, things get creepy really fast. I really like it as a group game. People can just holler something that they think might have changed, so it can be a group co-op game. Especially great around Halloween. With this game, what you see is what you get. It's simple, but with the right crowd could be effective. I think it's fun, but of course, a bit short-lived given the format. Number 36, Puzzling Places. This game is so inoffensive, I barely know what to say about it in either direction. It's VR-enabled 3D scan jigsaw puzzles. It's very relaxing. The best part of the game to me is the evolving soundscape. As you start putting together the pieces of the puzzle, you start to hear spatial environment ambient sounds. It's nice. It's a fun little game and easy to recommend because almost everybody knows their way around a jigsaw puzzle. Number 35, Lara Croft Go. This is a neat game. I love the idea of adapting an existing series like Tomb Raider into a completely different playstyle. Here is a minimalist Tomb Raider, where you tap locations on the screen to do simple turn-based actions. Usually it's about solving a positional puzzle to reach the goal. The only thing about this one is that I found it a bit too trial and error for my liking. I actually think at least part of that is probably on me, as maybe I didn't pay enough attention to the environmental cues to understand how something would move. So after a bit, I started losing and having to slowly restart the level. After a while, I lost my patience to try and get back to where I left off in the level as fast as possible, and of course, just make even more mistakes. But I still respect what the developers were doing with this. I applaud the idea of high-quality mobile releases that take advantage of the platform and try to give the audience something refreshing. Number 34, Marvel Snap. This is like a Marvel-themed Hearthstone Lite that you play online on mobile devices. The thing I admire the most about this game is that rounds are extremely fast, only a couple minutes. They also do an interesting design thing with the location in which you play your cards, where they get flipped over and revealed throughout the round and add some modifier. There's also some sweet effects they did on playing cards and doing their attacks. Really slick stuff. I was liking the gameplay of this game a bit, but the Marvel theming doesn't really do anything for me. Please don't be mad, but I'm mostly over comic stuff. There are some exceptions for the like the exceptional stuff like Spider-Man games or the Spider-Verse movies. But yeah, stuff like this is just a boring theme for me. And the multiplayer only focus was exciting. I love multiplayer games, but I just fell off pretty quickly as I didn't feel like I was using too much strategy. Not to say that there's no strategy to be found in the game, but maybe I just wasn't engaged enough to really start digging into proper tactics. Honestly, I highly recommend this game to those who like quick multiplayer games. Number 33, Kirby and the Forgotten Lands. Kirby finally gets a little bit of a shakeup in a post-apocalyptic setting of all things. When I first saw a preview of this game, I really thought it was going to be a new start for Kirby. It didn't take long after playing to realize that it was much safer than I had hoped. There were several times playing this game where I noticed I was just kind of going through the motions. There are some neat elements for Kirby's transformation though, and it is definitely a high quality title. Like, this thing is polished from start to end. So that much I can say in its favor. And if you really enjoy Kirby of past, you will definitely like this new entry. Although, again, I will say it is a little bit of a safe entry. Number 32, Rain World. Of all the games on the list this year, this is the one I wanted to like the most, and was heartbroken that it didn't land for me as much as I had hoped. There are so many elements that feel tailor-made for my tastes. Incredibly rich atmosphere, a unique and wildly detailed world, and gorgeous animations for the inhabitants to boot. But the game was sadly just too punishing for me, and this is coming from somebody who adores games like Spelunky, where you can die in a split second. The controls are so close but fall just short of being smooth and responsive, and the world is meant to be punishing. In fact, that's one of the coolest parts of this game. When the rain finally comes down, it's an unbelievable moment. One of the coolest things I've seen in a game all year. I may have to give this game another try sometime, as I desperately want it to connect. Number 31, Horizon Call of the Mountain. This game is almost pure spectacle. Several times during the year, I'd boot this up just to feel like I'm exploring a far future jungle with robo-dinos lurking around every corner. The game is honestly pretty shallow for the most part, but I do think the cool production was worth the ride for the most part. Also, I think I'm somewhat mixed on climbing in VR games. I don't know, it's mostly fun, but also can be a wee bit finicky. And I'm a bit mixed on this game. I love the look. I liked standing next to the other Horizon characters and making eye contact, but the gameplay is just a bit unmemorable and flat. Number 30, Tentacular. Have you ever fantasized about being a giant friendly kraken beast? Well, in VR, your dreams can be reality. But no, really, this game is super fun. Your hands become these wiggly tentacles, so as you move them around, they have a bit of springiness to them. Here you try to help a local town with all sorts of activities. The spin is having you do regular physics tasks, but with these floppy extensions to your hands. I really enjoyed doing things like using the power lines as slingshots, or creating wild structures to try and hold some object at a position. I do think the writing actively interfered with the fun of the game a bit though. Reading this amount of slow-ish text in a VR game is just not as enjoyable, especially in a game like this where the player's just begging to get back to the fun elements, and they are really fun. Number 29, Frog Detective 2: The Case of the Invisible Wizard. I just loved even reading that that title. I'm already like smiling and thinking fondly about it. I love the writing in the Frog Detective games. Grace Bruxner is a super funny writer. The humor is right up my alley with just the right amount of wit and silliness. Part of the joke with Frog Detective games is that not much really happens. You're an intrepid detective that barely does any investigation at all, and the cases themselves are deliberately wafer thin. And yet you'll be laughing the whole way through. My only wish is that these games got a little more love on the spit and polish. They're a bit brief and a tiny bit lacking on some of the fundamentals. Hard to hate on something this charming though. Go Frog Detective. Number 28, Threes. This is a smart and simple game. The elegance of the design is really the main appeal here. The actual story around the game's development and the related knockoffs precedes it in a way for me, so I was glad to finally play it for myself to see what it's like. It's maybe a touch too straightforward gameplay for me, but I appreciate what the team was aiming for here. I really like how smoothly it animates and controls. A lot of iterations went into this game to get it feeling just right. Overall, it's a fun and simple game. Number 27, Kena. This game feels like it was transported right out of the PS2 generation and given a modern coat of paint. And I say that mostly with endearment, but not entirely. This game is fairly thin and straightforward. It boasts some amazing art design and animation. The story and music are pretty solid. I enjoyed the adventure overall. I just hope that the next game from this studio either has more substance or trims down the size a bit so it's more dense. Number 26, Civilization 6. Last year I said that I was thankful for Cities Skylines, that it could give me a small peek into something I don't know enough about in real life. This year, that designation goes to Civ 6. I did learn a little bit from playing Civilization. The game is painstakingly designed to match world history, however, I felt it to be a bit much at times. It felt like sometimes it sacrifices concise or elegant game design in order to cover so many aspects of history. In short, it's a bit bloated. So many unit types, tech, and science upgrades that at times I just wish the game was about a third as complex. Still, hard to be overly disappointed when you have Sean Bean reading some amazing quotes to you as you climb the tech ladder. I'll play any game so long as Sean Bean can read to me. And I do love the incredible music in this game that develops as you get closer to current day. Seriously, it's just exceptional. The game is worth playing almost for the national music themes alone. Number 25, Moss. I'm no doubt being swayed by some of the immersion of these VR games, but for Moss, it's also just legitimately charming. You play as a ghost-like figure, which you'll see is a bit of a trend for me this year, that observes and helps a little mouse who's going on a big adventure. I love the simple puzzles and the way the mouse gestures to you about something they need. I just wish the game was a bit longer and the combat was a tiny bit more interesting. You can tell it was slightly de-emphasized in the game though, as the team really wanted to focus on making a simple adventure to follow. Number 24, Hi-Fi Rush. I feel so conflicted about this game. The visual design is simply divine, and the performances and writing are a lot of fun. However, I feel like the gameplay lets it down ever so slightly. Like Kena earlier on this list, it feels a bit like a long-lost PS2 game. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, it just means that the gameplay and world feel a tiny bit simplistic and dated. The combat also just didn't reach the heights I was hoping for. It has a neat rhythm mechanic, but it didn't fully click for me. A slight shame because the presentation really is quite amazing here. Just look at it. They design a world and cast that is super charismatic and full of life. I almost hesitate to call this Tango Gameworks' best game, but it might just be. Number 23, Sackboy's Big Adventure. I feel like this game flew under the radar a bit. For the most part, I think that's probably because it's so much like Nintendo's Mario 3D World. It has a very similar structure to the worlds in the multiplayer. Honestly though, I found the game pretty inspired. Maybe I just had low expectations going in, but I was shocked that I was enjoying this game more than Kirby. I think it really helped that the music and sound integration was so inspired. I don't feel like the game does anything radically new, but it's full of creative designs and is a lot of fun to explore. If it was just a bit more innovative, I think it could have made it further in the list. Number 22, Walkabout Mini Golf. Honestly, this game really just offers exactly what the title states. You can play mini golf and walk around the courses with your friends. It's so precise on the golfing aspects that if you make a mistake, you have nobody else to blame but yourself. The physics are that accurate. The visuals are a tiny bit crude, but some of the courses are really inventive. My favorites were ones like a whole course that took place in an upside down city, or another that takes place in a giant ritzy sub from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. The multiplayer is very easy to set up, it's cross-platform, and there are a lot of courses to play. Being able to just hang out in a relaxing place, chat, and play mini golf all at the press of a button, that's a pretty compelling pitch. Number 21, Carry On. I really underestimated this game. I put it off for a while because honestly the theme is very off-putting for me. I kind of just don't like the idea of playing as a murderous, disgusting monster. But I gave it an honest try, and I'm glad I did. It's a roaring good time. The most surprising part of the game is it actually controls shockingly well, even though you're moving around as a formless blob. You can effortlessly blast through levels, all while grabbing the members of the research facility. Maybe the one aspect of the game I wasn't thrilled about, funnily enough, were the parts where you don't play as a terrible fleshy monster. It just sort of didn't work as well as the other parts. Overall, this game is some really solid fun and surprised me with how fun the moment-to-moment gameplay was, as well as the general structure. Number 20, I Am Dead. This game just missed the cutoff of last year's ranking, so I played it the first thing I played in the year, I think. It's a really cozy title from Hollow Pond. In it, you play as a ghost that can investigate inside objects, sort of like getting cross-sections. It's fun. A ton of work went into modeling the outside and inside of objects as you play most of the game scrounging around, trying to find missing trinkets. The world is very obviously lighthearted, and I did smile a lot at all the stories that gave a glimpse into the legacy people will be leaving behind. I do think that the story ran maybe a tiny bit long at times, and I found myself wanting to get back to poking around the environment some more. Not a huge knock against the writing so much as it just being disjointed from the gameplay itself through interstitials and such. Still, it's a cute game and I enjoyed it. Number 19, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. This is a pretty slick game. The action is fun, the characters are expressive, and it's designed like a breezy next-gen roller coaster ride. The one unfortunate downside for me was that it's sort of compared unfavorably to another similar run and gunner in Housemarque's Returnal. I often say this when it comes to designing games, you probably want to distinguish yourself from other games out there unless you're certain that the comparisons will make you look good. In this case, Ratchet & Clank is really cool, but it just feels like a slightly lesser Returnal at times. Still, the story, world, and characters all give a sense of being thrust into an interactive Pixar-like movie. I mean, that alone is an excellent pitch for a lot of people. The game is a fun, breezy time. I just hope Insomniac can extend this a bit further in the future to feel a tiny bit less cookie cutter. Number 18, Super Mario Wonder. So, hot take coming in here. Putting Mario Wonder at 18 feels like I'm making a statement, but I really don't mean to be. Like this, I just feel this is where it deserves to be on the list. It's a good game, but not super great, like not incredible. So the tried and true formula is back, for better or worse. And I mean, it's nearly identical to its predecessors in this regard. Side by side, the controls and physics are pretty much exactly the same as the previous 2D entries, which might be fine. It controls very tightly, but offers little new in the way of fundamentals. The best part of a game like this is wherever you start to feel the game push back on you, which for me was somewhere near the latter half. It really shone bright for me there. Honestly, I find the sound and visual direction in this game to not be good enough. Visually, it's too sterile, and for the sound, it's too bland. I don't know why truly amazing production like that is reserved for the 3D Mario games, but I digress. In any case, it's nearly impossible to deny how solid this game is from a game feel standpoint. Honestly, it just feels good to be flying through the levels as Mario. After all these years, the formula still works. Side note, it's absolutely buck wild that some of the original team members on Super Mario Bros. In 1985 are still working at Nintendo and were part of this team. That is a true industry exception. Number 17, The Talos Principle 2. I really enjoyed the first entry in this series. I would be appropriate to say it makes you think, as it applies on a number of levels. It's a 3D puzzler game with fairly interesting mechanics. What sets the first entry apart to me were the themes of existentialism, consciousness, and agency. There were a number of moments that surprised me in how much it made me reconsider my own decisions and thought patterns, both within the game and without. Anyway, the second game is nowhere near as interesting on that level, but still a great ride on the puzzle front. It felt most of the narrative elements in this game to be weak. However, the puzzles kept me coming back. The puzzles themselves are devious sometimes, and there are many of them that walk the line between cognitive overload and something that you feel just capable enough to unravel. I couldn't shake the minor feeling of dissonance in the gameplay side. While the game has a lot of discrete states, it looks and feels like a 3D movement game with free physics and such, so until you get used to it, you start thinking of solutions to the puzzle to be like, that would have wiggle room, like maybe I can jump just high enough to grab that block, but you can't. It's all in very discrete states. Regardless, the scenery is mostly excellent and the puzzles are deliciously mind-bending here. Number 16, Resident Evil Village VR. I cannot be stopped with all my Resident Evil love, and neither can Capcom. This game is just such a trip in VR. All the beautifully detailed environments and sequences in Resident Evil just spring to life in VR. Some parts are absolutely horrifying once you're standing there yourself to see all the scale. I played the beginning of this game through screen share with a friend on another PlayStation, and I'm kind of glad I did. At least having someone else chuckle at my reactions was a small comfort. It was even fun watching friends play it. One friend seemed so spooked by the first enemy in the game that he appeared to just empty his entire clip rapid fire in blind panic. It's hilarious to watch. I think some of the cutscenes didn't survive this translation to VR without a bit of jank sprinkled in, but overall, this was a fun time seeing a game through a new perspective. And the only thing keeping it lower is that, well, obviously the structure is the same game that I've played a couple of times already. And I think I even had it in, yes, last year's list, or at least the DLC. Number 15, The Walking Dead, Saints and Sinners. This might be one of the most underrated games on the list this year. In a way, the license kind of does this game no favors. People might mistake it for schlocky television show and dismiss it out of hand. But honestly, this game has a ton going for it. It's probably one of the deepest and most engrossing VR experiences I've ever had. It has a dynamic world full of elements to interact with directly, even grabbing enemies' heads with your hand. It also has great progression design with crafting and scavenging for equipment. I feel like one of the two quest mechanics didn't work for me 100%, where characters wouldn't react how I expected, or some part was overly difficult, but still really appreciate what the team put together here with this. Number 14, Humanity. This game struck me as the type of game that would have released alongside PS1 and PS2 releases like Vib Ribbon or even Parappa the Rappa. It's a tightly scoped, quirky puzzle game about guiding flocks of people to a goal point while controlling a dog? I love that. This game just feels cozy to me. It really puts me in a focused state, both thinking about 3D space and also just with the mesmerizing patterns of people walking and bouncing around. With the theme around the game slowly evolving and makes you slowly start wondering about the meaning behind everything on display. It's super smart stuff here. I was somewhat mixed on the soundtrack. At times I did find it a bit grating, but luckily there was an option to change music tracks at one point. It's slightly disappointing as the compositions are almost nailing that similar feeling of its contemporaries and not quite there. Still, this is a cool game and rightfully it's gaining some fans. A bonus is that it comes with a level editor to create and share your own puzzles. That's cool. Number 13, Pavlov. If I can be reductive for a moment, it's effectively Counter-Strike in VR, but the attention to detail on the weapon interactions in VR make it a great and sometimes hilarious time. We had a great time playing this in multiplayer this year. Even when things didn't go as planned, like accidentally throwing a smoke grenade at the exact wrong spot, they could be still hilarious. What can I say? This is a formula that just lends itself super well to immersive elements and VR, and I had a great time playing in multiplayer with friends. The multiplayer nature obviously did huge lifting here, but I'm glad that the game gave us just the right setup for fun and hilarious times. Number 12, Chants of Sennaar. I feel like we're kind of getting into the there's not really any distinction, but I feel like this is getting very hard to rank these games at this point. But I'm trying my best. So here we go. Chants of Sennaar is a really smart game. You find yourself exploring a fantastic land where you can't understand anybody's language. However, once you start paying attention to the glyphs they use, you might start to notice patterns, make guesses at their meaning, and come to understand full sentences to ultimately understand the bigger picture. Just the language deciphering alone is brilliantly designed, but it even comes packaged in this beautiful art as well. It truly looks like a piece of fine art in motion at times. The only thing I think truly lets this game down a bit is that it's difficult to navigate at times. Perhaps it's just me, but at several times I just found myself confused about where things were, even after being in a particular space for a while. I'm not even sure if a map would have helped this. Regardless, it doesn't stop it from being a wicked time. A pretty impressive game from this studio, and they're definitely on my radar now. Number 11, Final Fantasy XVI. Let's get this out of the way. Final Fantasy XVI had the best soundtrack of the year, hands down. I mean, come on, just listen to this. And the best prologue demo, too, for what it's worth. This is a sort of funny game though. It's not actually all that much like a role-playing game at all, but it's an excellent action game with some of the most epic sequences ever seen. I do think that the combat misses the mark just ever so slightly, which I didn't expect. I actually think Final Fantasy VII Remake still holds the crown for greatest RPG combat system. But I loved the story, and it was a lot of fun to try a more grounded tone for a Final Fantasy game. In the end, I think it was a worthwhile experiment to try and make a different kind of experience for Final Fantasy, and some of those bigger sequences are going to be stuck in my head for a long time to come, as will the soundtrack. Number 10, Dreams. How do you even cover a title like Dreams? It's both a game and a tool, or many games, a multi-use engine of sorts. Dreams is such an ambitious release either way. It feels like the best kind of toy box. The one that also comes with the bits to rip it apart and make your own custom toys if you felt like it. I could go on about the remarkable technology behind the game, but I think really it's the experience that speaks for itself. I got to play a big selection of games made by the community and even the developers themselves. There was even a full, super charming title by the developers made inside Dreams recently called Trend. Some of the community games were so polished and surprisingly inventive. It was so cool to see what people would come up with once they had such an easy and powerful tool at their hands. Unfortunately, a game like this thrives through popularity, and it wasn't a blockbuster hit. But almost every time I came from Dreams, thinking all the creative ideas I had just seen and how cool it was to see what was probably many people's first foray into game development. I hope these creators keep going. Number 9, Ghost Trick. You ever play a game that made you angry that you missed it at its original release? Well, that's Ghost Trick for me. Ghost Trick is a Capcom game that shares some staff from the Phoenix Wright series, and it shows in the best ways. The remaster of the original DS game is so charming and sharp even in 2023. As a dead protagonist that's turned into a ghost, once again, playing as a ghost, you have to manipulate physical objects to save people around you and get to the bottom of a larger mystery. The music is excellent, the animations are funny and fluid, and the story is surprisingly interesting for how goofy it starts as. I do wish some of the puzzles weren't quite so obtuse, but otherwise it's a fun time. It feels like a lighthearted page-turning mystery with a fairly novel game mechanic wrapped around it. I can't believe this game never caught on back in the day. It's no wonder it's built a cult following over the years. I'm really happy I finally got a chance to play this. Number 8, Alan Wake 2. If you've ever played Alan Wake 2, then you'll know it's difficult to write about. I could probably write an entire essay on this one, but I'll try to stay brief. Back in 2001, a local film critic that my friends and I admired wrote a set of articles that led to a line of thinking that stuck with me all these years. His review for David Lynch's latest movie Mulholland Drive was awarded a dismal 1 star and 5 stars. Later he'd pen the list of best movies of the year, awarding Mulholland Drive a spot in both best movies of the year and the worst. Just preposterous. And yet there's something there. It's one of those ideas you just scoff at and dismiss and then refuses to go away until you work through the implication yourself. Alan Wake 2 is so much like Mulholland Drive, both in the respect that they pay homage to general Lynchian sensibilities, but also in challenging us on what we perceive as good at all. And I don't mean necessarily those works that are like, it's so bad it's good. I mean works that are pushing to challenge us in earnest. In Mulholland Drive, the characters are trapped in a dream-like timeline. At several times you can catch yourself laughing at the absurdity of the acting or the flow of the story, but they're in a dream, which seems natural for this stuff to happen. And still, there's something there. Alan Wake, at times, has what appears to be shaky acting, writing flanked by moments of irreverence and silliness. The signposting, wayfinding are royally messed up at times too. And yet, if you let it take you deeper, you sort of start to see the brilliance. Of all the games released this year, it's Alan Wake that demands you play to the very end until you decide if it's the 1 star, the 5 star, or both. For me, I'm glad I stuck it out. I saw the form of a 5-star game and I held it in my hands. Number 7, Spider-Man 2. I can say with confidence that this is the best game Insomniac has ever made. I do find the games to be pretty fun, if not a tiny bit safe on design at times, but this game feels like it's finally cracked into that higher tier. The addition of the wingsuit makes the game legitimately exhilarating at times. There are a couple of elements here that I've never seen another game be able to do, which almost makes it feel like an event. But what makes it all worthwhile are excellent game feel fundamentals and the consistently fun and interesting story. Maybe the only thing still holding this series back even a tiny bit is the combat, which is wildly improved on this outing in my opinion, but it's still ever so slightly showing some age with a list of combos. Either way, this is maybe tied for most easily recommended game this year. I know this is a spicy take, but Insomniac Spider-Man is leagues ahead of the cinematic universe of comic characters, although kind of an unfair comparison maybe when you can actually be the one that's swinging around. Number 6, Gran Turismo 7 VR. This is quite simply just an experience you have to see to believe. My first joyride in this game, I was actually just uncontrollably giggling because my brain was being tricked into seeing what it thought was real sunlight and reflections on the windshield in front of me. It's just stunning. One of my favorite aspects of this game is that you need to actually glance around at your various mirrors to know where your opponents are on the track. This kind of mechanic is just so interesting to me. In a way, it's a return to simplicity in that there's not much you need to teach the player. Driving around in this game with the rooftop down, seeing the stars above you, and your friend's headlights up on your dashboard is a real treat. I love it. Number 5, Resident Evil 4. Yeah, it's a remake, but it's also legitimately one of the best games I played this year. The original was a landmark title and an instant hit. It arguably helped shape the next 5 to 10 years of action-adventure titles with its amazing dynamic gameplay and high production quality. While this game doesn't have the luxury of being the only title of its kind anymore, the team at Capcom did such a good job at carefully reworking and refining the original game that it is, once again, one of the best action-adventure titles out there. The best parts of this game still feel like some of the industry's best in 2023, especially the way dynamic combat plays out with crowd control and various options to survive an attack. Both this and Final Fantasy VII Remake series show that remakes can have something for everyone. Because it's a brand new game, there's something for the veterans. For the newcomers, everything feels fresh and modern. This series and Capcom in general have been on fire, and you love to see it. Number 4, Cyberpunk 2077 plus Phantom Liberty. Last year, I was talking about how Cyberpunk just wasn't working for me. With all the issues around the gameplay and bugs, it just wasn't clicking with me as much as I'd like. I think I even put it around like number 30 on the list or something. This year, however, CD Projekt Red released a mega update with Cyberpunk 2.0 alongside a full story expansion called Phantom Liberty. This might be up there as the biggest turnaround I've ever had on a video game before. It's preem. With Cyberpunk 2.0, I think the game was changed and polished up enough that I just got to concentrate on the elements where it excels. The story, the characters, the sound, and grime of the city. Now, even the combat is so smooth that I found that aspect fairly fun as well, but the story and atmosphere are what really had me hooked. I even did almost all of the side stories because I just wanted to spend more time with the interesting cast of characters. This release serves as an excellent case study on how user experience refinement can allow players to finally relax into the world you strived so hard to build. The story and vibes of the space haunted me for weeks on end. I kept thinking about the central themes of the resilience of humanity and the kinship that we have in even the most oppressive of environments. What a hell of a comeback story this game has been. Number 3, The Case of the Golden Idol. This game is really something special. In it, you solve a string of increasingly complex, interconnected murder cases. The true brilliance of this game is in the separation of an exploration mode and a thinking mode. In exploration, you comb over the scenes, finding words you'll need. In thinking mode, you need to fill in the blanks to prove that you understand what happened. The mysteries are designed to always give you a thread to pull on and promise that all the information you need is in the scene and can be rationally deduced. Sometimes it's a trinket in somebody's pocket, a piece of dialogue, or a clue in the environment itself, but it's always solvable and will lead you to make eureka moments. It also sports a simple yet effective style that lets investigation move as fast as your thought. It also sports a semi-creepy art style that perfectly sets the mood and really worked for me. This was a wonderful surprise for me this year and also makes for one of the easiest recommendations. Number 2, Baldur's Gate 3. How to even begin on this one? Baldur's Gate 3 is just a massive and complex game to tackle in a discussion like this. So this is a Dungeons & Dragons licensed game. I might as well get something out of the way here. I don't hold any particular admiration for Dungeons & Dragons. Don't hate me, please. I just think it's slightly overrated. I'm not particularly fond on the reliance of chance or dice rolls. That feels like a whole other discussion onto itself though. I think the experience levels are not anywhere near granular enough, and I think there are way too many options for spells, items, abilities in this game for its own good. And this game adaptation of the tabletop experience unfortunately has some truly clunky implementations, such as the extremely finicky camera, the clunky jumping mechanics, and some poor difficulty balancing around the halfway point. But take a look. This game is number 2 on my list for a reason. There's so much going on in Baldur's Gate 3 to make it a landmark title, full stop. In short order, it has some of the greatest quest writing ever in an RPG. Some of the best writing ever, period. The coolest couch co-op split screen implementation maybe ever, where both people can be off doing their own thing and stick together if they really want. Excellent dynamic storytelling through meaningful player choice, and almost annoyingly beautiful character assets for given how big this game is. I mean, the hair rendering and design alone in this game is just unreal. There's no question that people will be replaying this game and discussing it for years to come, myself as well. It's that big of a deal. Hats off to Larian to make me a believer and convince me they're paving the way for a rosy future for this entire genre. Number 1. The Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom. This game had me on an absolute stranglehold at release. I was really fortunate to have gone into it pretty much blind and was handsomely rewarded for it. There are just so many little elements that surprised me. Some of the mechanics in this game are so mind-boggling that I truly wonder how they got greenlit at the studio at all. It's the kind of thing that if it was pitched at any other studio, people would think that they're just joking, because it shouldn't be possible. And not because people are mean or whatever, just generally feels like the mechanic you can't pull off in a game in any reasonable way, especially with this size. The kind of thing you'd almost be a fool to try. And they just did it. It leads to what feels like magic moments in discovering them for the first time. The physics system and the weapon combination system are simply brilliant. The power of going through the ground also made my head spin at the design and gameplay implications. Maybe the highest praise I could give to Nintendo here is that they made me believe that they still have the power to surprise us, all with how they push this medium forward. Fancy production, frills, innovative gameplay, massive world jammed with details, and all the while keeping it fun and engaging in the moment? And did I mention how solid this game is? For a game this jam-packed with ambitious ideas, they somehow made it look easy to pull off. That's a true sign of a master at work. I remember having doubts that this team could capture lightning in a bottle twice in a row. Consider these doubts just wiped clean. I'm sorry I ever doubted you, Nintendo. I can't wait to see what you dream up next. Okay, and that's a wrap. I just wanted to thank you so much for sticking around if you watched the whole thing. This is a fun time for me, and hopefully it's a fun time for you as well. So, thank you. Bye-bye.